Okay, will do.
Okay, thank you. Okay, take it away, Krista.
All right, so we'd like to call the meeting to order. So I guess we'll go around and do attendance. Someone else takes notes here? Or- Okay. Okay, Kristen Clark, Manchester.
Nancy Michaels, Dairy, London Dairy Chamber.
Andrew Hennick, Town of Chester.
Joey Cirrus, Town of Derry.
James Vale, Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission.
Mike Whitten, Manchester Transit.
Fred Roper, Easter Seals.
Jonathan Golden, St. Manchester.
Adam Lasney, Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission.
And off screen, you can see, there I am, Sylvia Von Allock, the Executive Director here at Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission. And why don't we go to our virtual attendees? Tammy,
Tammy Zamoyski, Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission.
Tom. You just have to unmute yourselves.
Tom Clow, Ware, Representative.
Thank you, Tom. Tim,
Tim White, New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services Air Resources Division.
great, thank you. And Nick,
Nick Alexander, New Hampshire DOT, Asset Management.
thanks, Nick. Matt,
Matt Baronis, Central New Hampshire Regional Planning Commission.
thanks, Matt. Mark,
Mark Sunan, Town of New Boston.
Jillian,
Jillian Harris, Town of Bedford.
Cam,
Hello, Cam Perlman, here with the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission.
and Zach.
Hi, good morning, Zach Swick with the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission.
All right,
All right, so I think first is a motion to approve the minutes from February 17th, 2022.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of February. Do you want to do one or both or separately, I mean, or?
I assume some people weren't at both
Oh,
of
okay.
them.
I apologize.
No,
All right,
I-
I'll do the meeting on February 17th to approve. Sorry.
All right, second. All in favor?
Aye.
anyone in the audience, Tom or Jillian, or Mark, were you also there at that, what was the meeting date?
February 17th.
February 17th?
The attendance list says I was there.
And Tim White, thumbs up from you,
I'll vote for approve.
okay.
I'll
Tom,
abstain.
Tom and Jillian,
I don't think I was there.
okay, all right, abstain then? And Tom abstain, or what's your
No, I approve.
approve? Okay, I was there, I approve. All right, and George,
Okay,
not George, Fred. Sorry. Oh my
all right,
God.
so next would be the action of minutes from March 17th, 2022.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of March 17th.
Second.
All in favor?
Okay.
Aye.
Aye. And again, okay, I got a thumbs up from Tim, Tom,
I abstain.
thumbs up from Mark, Jillian,
Yes.
thank you. All right,
All right, so next up is guest presentation on the transportation asset management plan.
so Nick, that's you. I've already made you a co-host, so you can control your screen.
All right. Do you see a slide that says Transportation Asset Management Plan?
We do.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm going to do an overview of the TAMP. This is actually a document that we're required to do every 4 years. The prior one was done actually 3 years ago because that was the first one and it had a phase-in period. And we are submitting this new one actually by the end of June, so within the next 2 weeks, to Federal Highway. And some basic info. The TAMP it's one of those required documents, much like I saw on the screen before, the TIP amendment that you guys are going to be reviewing for your TIP. The TAMP is a required document that the state has to put together. And some basic info that it has to have. And some differences to how we often describe pavements and bridges. So one difference is it's NHS, so it's National Highway System Pavements and Bridges. So that's a subset of the overall state transportation network. It actually includes some roads and municipalities too. And bridges, normally the definition in New Hampshire of a bridge is a 10-foot or greater span, but the federal definition is a 20-foot or greater span. So when we put bridges in here, it's actually 20 feet or greater. So the numbers are a little different than what folks are used to seeing. We need some objectives and we need some life cycle info, and I'll talk about all these in more detail. We have to talk about risk. There does have to be a financial plan, which for us in New Hampshire is easier than a lot of folks because we lean on the 10-year plan. Because the financial plan TAMP requirement is actually that it looks out 10 years. So it's very convenient. And there needs to be information about investment strategies. One of the other important features, especially for an MPO, is strategies, targets, and approaches that must, not a should, a must be reflected in STIPs and TIPs. So when you guys put together a TIP that's based on the 10-year plan, the strategies that we include in the TAMP are already linked to the 10-year plan. And so your TIP is already linked to the TAMP. Lots of acronyms there. But fortunately, because we have that process, it actually all fits together pretty well. So jumping into some, and feel free to interrupt with questions at any time. So some pavement basics. One of the changes that Federal Highway made really only came into being probably back in 2018 is that condition for pavements is roughness, cracking, and rutting. So again, normally in New Hampshire, if you've seen our pavement condition maps or you've used that data, generally it's been roughness only, which is really just a measure of pretty obviously how rough the road is. Cracking and rutting were added as two other distresses that we have to include when we're rating pavements. So we can still report on just roughness, but for the TAMP, we have to include cracking and rutting. So one of the things that changes is these percentages are often lower than what you might have seen in other, at least the good percentages, than what you might have seen in other publications from DOT or heard on the news or anything like that. So for the interstate, we're at 62% good. And if we were doing this just on roughness, we're around like 98% good. So cracking and rutting really pull this into fair. They don't change poor much, which is good. The interstate system is in good condition. And the non-interstate, similarly, some good, bunch of fair, and very little poor. Overall, the NHS as a subset of the overall system, we do keep it in better shape. And then this other table just kind of shows by ownership. So the NHS, it's mostly DOT main, some DOT turnpikes, especially the interstate, and then some miles are in municipalities on the NHS. So one of the other things that we include in the TAMP is a forecast of condition. And so this is an interstate, non-interstate. And this has been our trend, the green dots. And this is the forecast, which is declining for the interstate. And the same with the non-interstate. This has been the trend and it's declining. This dashed line, and I'm really only going to talk about poor or good condition, because poor is very low. I will talk about this one though. So conditions declining, and one of the questions would be, is that a bad thing? And the reality is that it's not something that we're too concerned about, especially in the midterm. In the later years, we are a little bit, and in particular about this poor condition that might be increasing on the non-interstate NHS. So just some highlights, good conditions are declining. And that's, really a feature of the way that we tend to treat these roads. It's roughly on a 10-year cycle, and it includes preservation and maintenance. But what we see is that with that cycle, we have reasonable conditions. Obviously, we could invest more money, but it doesn't really change that much. When we talk about managing pavements, we usually talk about managing good and fair, not just good, because fair condition pavements are very good to drive on, and they don't really change the maintenance requirements. Once you get into poor, then that's where you would start to see, potholes being more likely, or other things that do actually affect driving. So again, poor condition stays negligible on the interstate, and then on the non-interstate, it does increase more than what we call the state of good repair target. And that's really this portion. And for anyone who was part of the 10-year plan process over the past year and a half, obviously the MPO was part of what DOT's talked about is not quite enough funding for, in the 10-year plan, it's called Tier 2 pavement rehabilitation. It's a program that we tend not to fund as much because it's fairly expensive work. And because of the change in things like TIFIA switching to the I-93 bonding and then sunsetting after a period of time, there's not as much funding to address all of the Tier 2 rehabilitation needs. So we talk about that as a gap. It's a gap between the state of good repair and what we foresee the condition being. So again, part of the forecast, it uses it's still current draft 10-year plan, but hopefully signed into law soon. And when we did different tests in the model, what we found was some additional funding, especially in the rehabilitation area, did help bring that down. So when we talk about a gap and what we'd look for in the next 10-year plan would be additional funds allocated to Tier 2 rehabilitation. Any questions on pavements before I move on to bridges? All right, moving on. So bridges are rated on deck super
Sorry, Nick.
Yeah.
If you open the chat, Mark Sunan had a couple of questions, and I think it'd be easiest if you read them and then answered them, if that's possible.
Sure. So do the forecasts take into the funding increase from the IIJA? Yes, they do. So the current draft 10-year plan, fortunately, was put together and updated when the IIJA numbers came out in November, December, January. So, and the models were updated to reflect those. So yes, they do. Does it take into account the limited number of contractors that can support the additional funding? No, it doesn't. That we have seen a decrease in the number of bidders that we have for certain projects. And we've certainly seen, like any community, increases in item costs, but it does not take into the current situation around those issues. Anything else?
think we're ready to move on. Thank you.
All right. So bridges. Again, bridges are rated on deck super sub. So there's little pictures in the TAMP, but the deck is the part you drive on, the superstructure, think of it as the girders that you see, the steel part of the bridge usually. And then the substructure is what all that rests on, right? It's the concrete on the sides. And overall, we have 58% good, 37% fair, and 4.3% poor. Similarly for ownership, most of it's owned by DOT Maine, some of it's owned by turnpikes, and a portion of it is owned by municipalities of bridges. And these are all in deck square feet because that's how Federal Highway makes us report things. So a little simpler than pavements because we don't have to break out interstate from non, but overall condition, good condition has been trending up and has been flat or slight decline recently. Poor condition, thankfully, was trending down. And from a forecast perspective, we do expect good to continue or to really decline, but we also expect poor to decline. And so the highlights, when we looked at this, and I'll talk about why in a moment, similar to payments, you might think declining good condition is a bad thing. Part of what we look at when we look at the life cycle is that this is actually expected, and it's not a bad thing. What's very good to see is that the poor condition is also expected to continue to decline. And just like pavements, these are based on current funding and what's in the 10-year plan. So the reason that poor or good condition moving into fair isn't a bad thing is this is actually our life cycle. So bridges get rated, really it's 1 to 9, but they didn't want to change the axis. And these are years. So if we built a new bridge, it starts out at a 9. And then what we intend to do for that bridge over time is we preserve it once, we preserve it twice, and then we do have to do a rehabilitation. And so this stepwise, this is the deterioration in condition, right? So it starts as new, gets a little older and goes to an 8, a little older goes to a 7, a little older is 7 and a 6, and we do a preservation. One of the important things about preservation is it doesn't actually change the condition rating of the bridge itself. Rehab does, and that's why it goes up here. But the preservations just make it stay the way it is for longer. So we get more life out of that bridge. And good is 7 and higher, and poor is 4 and lower. So if you look between 7 and 6, a lot of the bridge's life is spent in this fair condition. And so that's why the decline in good isn't alarming to us. We would actually expect the state of good repair at 39.4. We would expect a bridge to spend the vast majority of its life in this kind of middle fair state. And we manage that. And that's why it's not a bad thing or an unexpected thing. Any questions about bridges?
We're all set.
All right. Moving on to risk. So risk was something that was introduced 4 years ago with the first TAMP. We use a pretty basic model, likelihood and consequence. So the likelihood is the frequency, the consequence is, what happens if the risk comes to fruition, right? So if you take flooding risks, right? So on the likelihood scale, the frequency, we know how often parts of the seacoast flood, and we know how often in general roads or bridges flood from storms. So that's the frequency component. And then the consequence, similarly, we understand what's happened in the past. We know things could get worse due to changes in precipitation, but we have a good history on what actually happens when things are damaged. So we rate the impacts to safety condition, how broad the events usually are, the impacts to mobility, and the overall cost. So basically all the risks get rated, and when we went through that process, these ended up being the highest risks for DOT. So 2 that are related to flooding, 1 that's related to like the pavement that I mentioned, the tier 2 rehab not having enough money, shortfalls in funding, staffing. Right now at DOT, we're around 18% vacancy, I believe, overall. And that just creates challenges in getting jobs out and maintaining and preserving everything. And obviously, again, cost increases. Right now, that's we certainly see that in our projects, just like we see it at the grocery store. Another component of risk, which was actually kind of strengthened in the IIJA language, was resiliency. So part of what we're including is some additional work on the seacoast area for coastal flood risk. And then highlighting for inland flooding, the inspection programs that we have. And then part of the coastal flood risk, especially around criticality and kind of preparing or having design being part of changes in precipitation, is something that we can apply inland once we understand it better for the coast. Questions about risk?
Not here.
All right. Financial, so that's another aspect. Again, for New Hampshire, it's convenient in that the TAMP had a 10-year requirement. We have a 10-year plan, and that feeds into the STIPs and TIPs. So really, for like the modeling, the forecasting that I showed, we take the draft 10-year plan and all those committed projects and dollars, and that's what we use for the basis for the modeling and forecasting. Which is very convenient for us. And it's actually something that a lot of other states had to adapt to, because it was more common to have like a 6-year plan or something shorter than 10 years in other states. But the 10-year plan and the TAMP includes, everything, projects, programs, budgets. Inflation, the 10-year plan takes a long-term look at inflation. So it's not the inflation we're currently seeing. But when you look back 20, 30 years, inflation does always balance out and has kind of an underlying growth as opposed to what we're seeing right now. And then work types. Work types are a little interesting in that Federal Highway defines them as maintenance, preservation, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. So we do relate those work types to the projects and programs in the 10-year plan. And that is the last slide. So any kind of general questions about the TAMP, or since you have me, if there's any other questions you guys have.
Any questions for Nick? James?
Nick, I just ask, there's what you need to report to federal government, sort of a requirement aspect of things, but just wondering if, because I know there's utility in collecting this asset data and using it for management of the overall transportation network. I see that through the work we do with SAIDS in cooperation with New Hampshire DOT. And I'm wondering if sort of give some practical examples of how this translates into sort of ease of management for New Hampshire DOT.
Yeah, so kind of 2 examples, one that's TAMP and one that's a little bit more SAIDS. The pavement condition or the bridge condition, honestly, that we collect, we've collected it long before the TAMP was a requirement. And we do collect it for the entire state system, not just what DOT owns. You know, we inspect every bridge in the state, and we collect pavement condition on all state roads, even those that are managed by municipalities and compacts. You know, just yesterday, someone from my office was part of a group looking at what they should be resurfacing in 2024 and 2025. And the primary input into that initial list of candidates is the pavement condition. So we collect the data, and that creates the starting point of which roads we should be preserving, which roads we should be rehabilitating, or just holding together with the maintenance resurfacing. So, you know, pretty directly, the condition that we collect on for pavements goes right into part of our planning for the programs. Away from the TAMP for a moment, and you mentioned SAIDs, you know, working, we have a culvert inventory, and there's kind of two flavors of it. There's the more detailed work that some MPOs worked on with DES in particular in some communities. And that has a very large list of attributes that go with it. And we use that data. We also have a larger collection, but of smaller attributes, a shorter list that we've done for all culverts that are close to state roads. And just like pavements, that list and the condition that goes with it goes right into the culvert management program for candidates that we would look to, if they're in poor condition, what would it take to either replace or repair, rehab, or just inspect again and actually realize that the first inspection, you know, they really couldn't see into the whole pipe, so the condition isn't as bad as they thought.
Thank you.
All right.
Next.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks for your time. And you can stop sharing now. And I will bring up hopefully my next thing. All right.
All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
So up next is a update of the TIP Amendment 4.
Right. Okay, so why do I not see my PowerPoint screen? Show all of those. Get on the words, show all of those. Oh, here we go. Thank you. Your plan tip. Sorry, everybody, just trying to figure out, why this is so gigantic. Move over here. Okay. So, can you see the PowerPoint slide? Our virtual viewers.
Yes.
Yes,
now
we can.
Thank you. All right. You can't see me, which I don't know, is probably good or bad, but I don't know where I am now. Can you see me?
Yes.
We can.
All right. That's probably scary, but all right. So as you know, usually this is Nate's favorite thing to do, talk about transportation. And Carl would be the next pinch hitter. So you're at the third level, me. And of course, luckily for me, Nate did present this at our last MPO meeting. So of course I've watched it 1,000 times, but I have not memorized it. So let's take it away. We're going to talk about TIP amendment number 4. So DOT has requested that the commission amend our fiscal year 21 to 24 TIP to accommodate a series of project additions and removals, funding, cost adjustments, and scope changes. Now, you're used to Nate making this exciting. No, don't expect that. I'm reading. So the TIP amendment was released on June 6th. We have a 10-day public comment period that ends tomorrow. We did receive one comment, interestingly enough, from DOT, and that is because there was one additional project, and the easiest way to add that was to add it during the comment period. Makes sense, right? And the public hearing for consideration for adopting the TIP is at our MPO meeting on June 28th. So far, so good? Nobody's going to ask questions, right? Please don't ask questions. So I'm going to go over the series of projects, and Mark asked about the IIJA and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Thank goodness that Nate had spelled that out here, because I wouldn't be able to remember it. So you'll see several projects that, because of that additional funding, we have so many more projects, which I think is exciting. So let's talk about some bridge projects. So this one in Auburn, number 29316, is a bridge rehabilitation project over Griffin Mill Road and over Maple Falls Brook. So again, the change, with each of these projects, we have the proposed amendment and the reason for the proposed amendment. So the proposed amendment, changing the source of construction phase funding from the state aid bridge to this municipal off-system bridge federal funding. Well, the acronym is MOBILE, which is fun, and that's what I'm going to say from here on out, because it's a lot easier. And as I mentioned, it's because of this new funding. Similar, we have this project in Bedford, number 24217, also bridge replacement, Eels Road over, oh my goodness, Babosic Brook. I hope, Jillian, I said that right.
Buzik.
Babuzik. Thank you. Okay, that's just fun to say if you know how to say it. Babuzik. Again, the proposed amendment is because of that mobile federal funding, and again, because of the new bridge program funding. Switching over to Derry Londonderry, project number 13065. This is the exit for a preliminary design, final design, right-of-way, construction of new interchange and connecting roadway. Now, for anyone watching from Derry, this doesn't change the project at all. So, and we all have heard Nate use the phrase child projects, right? This is because we're going to have the removal of the construction phase funding into these child projects. So it just goes from this one big thing to a bunch of these little things. Okay, beautiful, right? Everybody's happy. And so we're going to see some of those split off projects. And you can see here, there are a variety of those projects. And that's a portion of that right-of-way phase funding is also being changed from the state block grant to this flexible other stuff. So, and that's my professional way of putting that. Thank you very much. Bye. And here's one of those child projects. And this is a demolition project, project 13065E. So that's the same number, but now the little child reference to baby E. And this is, oh my God, well, this is a new project. And it's the demolition of a variety of buildings on Folsom Road. This is all very clear and no questions, right? Everybody's happy, good. Manchester, project 43850. So this one's an exciting one in that this didn't come from us. This came from the executive council process. And they added this project. So we don't actually have a lot of information on this project. I did listen to Nate's commentary several times on this just to see if I could get any inkling, and we just don't have much information. So stay tuned, but it is a new project. There you go. New Boston, project 15505. Again, similar to the other ones, bridge replacement, Tucker Mill Road over Middle Branch of the Piscataqua River. This is again from the mobile funding and again from the IIJA. Let's see, we have our culvert replacement, rehab, and drainage repair program. I believe this is a statewide program. It increases construction phase funding for fiscal year 23 and 24. And this is again additional funding. Oh, this is additional funding required to complete statewide projects in this program. And for our region, it includes the rehabilitation of a 72-inch culvert carrying Bowman Brook under New Hampshire Route 114. That's a very big culvert. So there you go. This is for the actual mobile project itself. This establishes the new statewide program. And we've already talked about where the funding is coming from. So the IIJA. So this is so many acronyms, so little time, the MOBR. So the municipal owned bridge rehabilitation replacement projects. And this is increasing construction phase funding in fiscal years 23 and 24. And the reason for the amendment is it utilizes federal surface transportation block grant funding to support the bridge projects. It's going to keep going. The TISMO program. Okay, another statewide transportation system management and operations, the ITS technologies and traveler information. So the amendment is to increase funding in fiscal year 22 through 24. And it's the reason for it is required funding to complete statewide projects in the program, including procurement of this new New England Compass Advanced Transportation Management System. That's a mouthful. And funding from the Maine and Vermont in support of that particular system is included in this program. Thank you for no questions. The program for the update of signage on the state transportation system. This proposed amendment increases program funding in fiscal year 22. And the reason is the additional funding is required to complete the statewide projects in this program, including replacement and upgrade of enhanced reference location signs, better known as mile markers. Now, you might think, oh, is this controversy replacing the mile marker for the numbering? No, if you listen to Nate's MPO his presentation, you'll know that it does not, that is not the controversial project. This just replaces the signage as is. No different numbering, just as is. Okay.
It's those little ones on the side that say mile, 28.5.
Thank you,
Okay.
Nancy. Nancy makes a clarification.
I assume that's what I was asking you.
Oh, it sounds good.
Yeah.
I like it.
I don't know what else it is.
Everyone like that answer? Okay, good. Salem to Manchester, 10418X. This is the final design and right of way for I-93 Salem to Manchester corridor. they're removing this project. So how fun is this? We get to even talk about projects they're removing. So there's gonna be no questions. The project's done. So yay.
It only took 30-something years.
Thank you for that note. Thank you, George. Another statewide project, number 43931, constructed these weigh-in motion stations for traffic data collection. It's a new project to the tip. The reason for the amendment, so there are federal requirements that stipulate that states must continuously collect traffic data, including these vehicle weights on certain roadways. So, so as I listened to Nate on this, I could just picture myself doing the clunk clunk as you're driving down the highway, because you've just run over these metal things. And so that's the weighing in. So it made me not want to eat the ice cream and not weigh in. But anyway, that was just me being funny. So, so those are these motion scales that capture axle weights. And this is a federal requirement. And you can see here, the construction of that station is on I-93 northbound between exits 8 and 9 in Manchester. All right, another statewide project, number 43932, construction vehicle classification stations and vehicle count stations for traffic data collection. Proposed amendment, this is adding another new project to TIP. And the reason for the proposed amendment is, again, that federal requirement stipulates that states must continuously collect the traffic data on certain roads, and the installation would include a vehicle classification station on New Boston Road in Bedford. So there you have it there. This project, interestingly enough, crosses our neighbors' borders. So this is sort of in conjunction with Nashua Regional Planning Commission. So it includes communities from Wilton, Milford, Amherst, and Bedford, project number 13692E, traffic and safety improvements based on the 2002 corridor study of New Hampshire Route 101. The proposed amendment, it's adding a new project to the tip. And this project is for the continued implementation of the improvements identified in the New Hampshire Route 101 corridor. And isn't that so annoying that that is right where I want to read my, I cannot see what that says, but oh, here we go. Can we move this? Yes, thank you. And the DOT is currently refining a prioritization study of locations to determine the specific improvements to be implemented through this project, with a decision expected by the end of this summer. Why is summer highlighted? If you went back to Nate's presentation back at the last MPO meeting, it said by the end of May. I did my homework. I called Jason over at DOT, the project manager, and I said, well, it's past the end of May, Jason. What's happening with this project? So they've just finished the study, and now they're going to spend the summer touching base with Nashua Regional Planning Commission, with us and these communities. And they're going to get the information and do some collaboration. It's going to be all fun, and we'll see what happens by the end of the summer. So stay tuned.
Well, that's good, because the corridor study was only 2002, so you want them to take their time.
Yeah, yes, thank you, thank you. That was Mike Whitten, by the way. Why aren't you moving? Why aren't you moving? Oh my golly. Come back over here. That's interesting. I don't want to end show.
Is that the last one?
No, it isn't. There's one next. We'll just do next. This is the exciting slide. Here, you've all been wondering, what was the comment from New Hampshire DOT? Well, here we go. It's to request the following project change. Londonderry. George.
Sorry.
This is exciting stuff.
No, it was related to.
Andrew. This
Sorry,
is the,
Sylvia. It's my fault.
You're losing, Sylvia.
I just.
oh, I'm losing my audience. So Londonderry Project 41715, the project operational and capacity improvements at the intersection of New Hampshire Route 28 and Stonehenge Road. This is all about, it needed additional PE funding. I did my homework here too. I have the letter in case anyone wants to read specifics. It's additional $66,000 required for fiscal year 22. And this is due to the pandemic. The schedule has been extended to assist with the NEPA documentation, environmental coordination, and engineering to assist the permitting and public outreach of the project. So what is our, so according to, unfortunately, to our agenda, this was just information. No, wrong. We need action. So the action is to recommend adoption of the tip number 4 and to put it forward to the MPO.
We'll make a may I, Kristen? I'll make a motion to recommend adoption of tip amendment number 4 to the MPO.
I'll second. Oops, sorry.
I was paying attention, so.
Thank you.
So we need a vote.
Let's first see if there are any questions. Hi, everyone. You're back on the screen and just wondering if there's no questions. We have a motion. And was there a second? Yes, thank you, Mike. All right.
I just had a question. I thought they had to move money for the Manchester Adaptive Project in the tip amendment for. I'm not sure.
I just used the exact, so should I go back?
The agenda says information only, is that an error?
Yes, that's an error. Thank you. All right, let me go back and see. I'll have to reopen that. So hold on. Share screen.
So top left there.
This one? Okay, everyone can see this again? Tammy?
Yeah.
Somebody, thank you. Okay, from beginning. Let's find that. Well, let's first find the slide. Maybe. Go somewhere in here. Bedford. Derry. So here's,
There it is.
so it's 41747 implementation. Implement an adaptive signal control system on Granite Street and upgrade South Willow Street.
Okay.
Was that the one you were thinking?
Yeah, that moves the funding, right, to an earlier year, to this
Yeah.
year?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that's what I did.
Now you're happy?
Now I'm happy.
Thank you. All right. Kristen's happy. Any other questions about specific projects before I take this away from our virtual audience?
I have one quick one. I don't know if anybody knows, but with the removal of I-93 and that project coming totally out, does that have an impact on Boston Express? Because that's how that was kind of brought into the world and funded. I don't know if there's anybody like on in web, it looked like Nick might be gone. Is anybody from DOT still here?
Let me stop sharing and see if we have any from Nick. You're still here.
Oh, he's there.
I am still here.
Did you hear the question?
I did. So if memory serves, and it's been a while since I was the STIP guy, but Boston Express, I am 100% sure that folks would have let people know if this change was affecting Boston Express funding. I'm pretty sure that they separated that funding a number of years ago from the Salem to Manchester project after it started the service and built the stations and rest areas. Trucking heads, rather.
Awesome.
Okay. All right. And so we have a motion and a second.
All those in favor?
Yeah.
Aye.
Okay, let's see, we need we need votes from Mark. Thumbs up. Jillian,
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Okay, and Tim,
Yes.
thank you. Okay,
Right, so next up is an overview of the 2025 to 2034 10-year plan process.
okay, so you're all excited because you get to hear more from me. And, okay, so from the beginning. Why isn't it doing from the beginning? Okay, can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
This is not
Tip
it.
amendments.
Oh my goodness. Well, I
And you're
have,
not in presentation mode.
okay, fine, stop share. Let's go back, share screen, all right. Obviously, I went here, I guess, I'm looking for the 10-year plan. This is what I want, everybody's saying right? Right, 10-year plan, share. What is going on?
You just have to escape out of that. So click on that screen and then press escape.
This screen?
Yep, click on the presentation, press escape, and it will exit presentation mode. And show, yeah. And then you can go to the right window.
Okay, so what I'm trying to share is over on this little screen. This is enough to drive anyone to drink. Okay, here we go. No, it's not. Here we go. There. Whew. All right. Now, does everyone see the 10-year plan in big mode?
Yes.
Presentation mode. Thank you, Tammy. All right, now let's just see. So this is an overview of the 2025 to 34 10-year plan, transportation improvement plan, and the update process. Today, I though will say that what we have an assignment, so we have homework to do. And many of us have been through this before, and that's to specifically look at the criteria and to evaluate it. So we have, everyone has in their packet the criteria, and we're going to take a look at that. We're going to go through several slides before we get there, but that's our main goal. All right, so hang on. Hopefully not such a bumpy ride. So, you know that we work collaboratively with New Hampshire DOT to develop the 10-year plan. And this is updated biannually, and it will cover the fiscal year 25 to 34. This is Nate's favorite slide of all time. We have probably all seen this slide. So this tells you from concept, from the long range transportation plan, which is a federal requirement, up to the construction, so the tip. And what we're working on is what's in right smack in the middle, the 10-year plan, which is a state requirement, which is a little bit unusual because this is something that New Hampshire does. And we'll just move on. Nate likes to talk more about it, but that's your summary from me. All right. In the past 10-year plan update cycles prior to IIJA, New Hampshire DOT has allocated a total of $50 million for regional projects. That share of the previous statewide allocation of the 50 million has been 8.55 million for Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission. And that stayed very much level for multiple generations of 10-year plan. Now we have the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and that has resulted in substantial new federal transportation funding coming into New Hampshire. So the total federal highway apportionments to New Hampshire in fiscal year 21 were, that's a big number, 180,875,053. I'm not going to even attempt it. So federal highway apportionments to New Hampshire in fiscal year 22 is an increase of 21%. due to IIJA. It's a lot easier just to say the percentage. Here we go. So right now, we're under discussions with New Hampshire DOT. So will we be getting any increase in that funding? And so that's something being discussed. We are hoping, and we have certainly all the MPOs have let DOT know that we hope that that same 21% increase will be seen in our allocation. And if that's true, it would be proportionally an increase to approximately 10.56 million. We're still talking with DOT about that, so we're not sure what we might get. So the 9 regional planning commissions utilize the same set of 15 criteria. So now we're talking about criteria to evaluate and prioritize projects for inclusion in the 10-year plan. These criteria are weighted individually by each region to reflect the unique needs and priorities of that region. And the last time we went through this process of looking at criteria weighting was in July of 2020. So right in the beginning, really, of the pandemic, right? And so now we're looking to do that again. This is what you have seen in the past, and this is what was adopted. It's a little bit hard to see, but we have multiple elements: economic development, equity, environmental justice and accessibility, mobility, natural hazard and resiliencies, network significant safety, state of repair and support. Well, I worked with staff and I tried to make a slight improvement on that. And what we've done here is we've ordered it, not alphabetically now, but by the percent of where we've weighted. And I wonder, James, can you hit the lights, because the glare is intense for me anyway. So if you can see, let me get my mouse over here. There we go. So we still have our various elements, just like before, but they're grouped according to how you've weighed them, any of the priorities. So we know many and most of these categories have multiple elements. So for example, safety has both safety performance and safety measures, but the total based just for safety is a total of 17.25. For network significance, 16.85. For mobility, 14.08. For state of repair, 12.53. For economic development, 12.02. For equity, environmental justice and accessibility, 11.71. For natural hazard resiliency, 11.24. And for support, 4.3. What we also did was, so that you could actually see this a little better, was to divide all those elements in 2 slides. So here, and we can now, if there's interest, we can look at each one of these components. But what we want to do is, does this look right to the group? And I'm also including, when I'm talking, to also, of course, our virtual community representatives and also Tim from DES. So I hope everyone opens their mic at this point at home, and let's just talk about one of these at a time. That works for everyone. So safety, we have safety performance at 7.44, and we have safety measures at 9.81. We have a thumbs up from Mike. Anyone want to reconsider these? I'm not hearing anyone, so I'm going to move to the next one. Network significance. We have traffic volume and facility importance at 8.79 and the latter at 8.05. How does that seem to everybody? Good. So I'm getting a nod from Mike. So I'm just going with Mike because Mike rules all today.
For the safety performance, are people providing that crashed? Where's the data coming from to look at, rank those?
That's a good question. I believe that's from just what the data we have.
If Zach were here, he would say it used to be FARs and now it's kind of mush of things. So I don't have a good answer for you. I think even I think internally we're struggling on how to get consistent data.
Yeah, because I know like the database that you guys have helped us use before, it's not very accurate and things aren't locatable. And so I'm just wondering how you can really rank that.
Well, you know, when someone provides us a project, we have to rely on the information they provide. So we would look at whatever analysis or data they have, and whatever crash history they have. If they have a police record that shows there's been a crash there once every couple of years, then that's the police record, which is probably better.
It's really
than
hard for us
anything
to
else.
get. I don't know if everyone else has as much
We-
trouble working with the police departments, but
Right.
I mean, to actually like, we can pull numbers relatively quickly from PD, but it takes, like, if you want to see reports and see what happened, if it's related to the intersection, it takes a really long time to get.
Right, there's confidentiality issues when we always let the police departments know. We don't want specific details. We certainly don't want details about the people, but maybe why did the accident happen? Was it something related to the infrastructure or was this a behavioral issue? So we, you know, we're more interested in infrastructural problems, obviously.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just don't know how you, I feel like a lot of any new projects where you're gonna have a hard time getting some of this data,
Yeah.
but just a thought.
So when you're talking about that, and for everyone at home, that this is Kristen talking and bringing this topic up. I'm wondering, do you want to drop that because because of the difficulty of the correct data? Or do you feel like, nope, safety should be at the top of our list?
I guess I haven't really read through like the application, the whatever, the PDF you guys sent out about what you have to, the information you need to provide. So I guess it kind of depends on, are you looking for accident data for us, or are you guys using some internal system to look at accidents? And if so, what is that? So I guess until
No,
you know that.
We look for what the community provides.
Okay.
If nothing's provided, we would default back to federal data, but it's, like you said, it's not great.
I mean, for Derry's case, what Kristen said, we do the same thing. So we contact the PD, like we had our bike trail application. We've had some road intersections that the planning commission has helped us with. But we get the police reports, so we always say, let's go back 3 years. So you're gonna get the officer, you're gonna get that basic stuff.
Yeah.
And so we plug in the numbers and say, okay, there were 14 accidents at that intersection, whatever. But as a side thing, and it's a good point that you made, just yesterday, we're doing a traffic study in there. We hired a third-party traffic engineer to look at some mixed-use projects on road network. So they're trying to collect data. So they have the police reports, which came just like that, no problem, like in a couple of days. But her name's Allison. She sent an email to the police captain and myself yesterday saying, I appreciate the reports, but I really need more data, like saying what caused that accident to happen as you go into those intersections. And she said, you know, maybe you can read out the names like Sylvie said. So that's more difficult to get, but for the planning board to do a good traffic study on these 3 major mixed-use projects, we need to look at that. So that they may not make that available. It's a challenge to get that part of it. But if you just need to see, 25 accidents, yeah, we can provide that and give you the time, the day, the
Yeah.
weather condition.
Yeah, very basic information.
Yeah. But I don't know what other alternate, I mean, if it's a state road, we do the same thing. We reached out to DOT and we'll say, what's your state, what records do you have? Because Derry has state roads in our case. But I don't know, Sylvia, what other option you can find updated info.
No. Yeah, it's a universal issue, I would say. But back to what we're trying to do, we're not gonna solve the data issue, obviously, but the rating, how you want to weigh that particular topic. Is that good the way it is, or do you want to change that? Any thoughts, including people who are here virtually?
So Sylvia, can we change the way the sub-criteria description is written? I think listening to the discussion here, perhaps we want to focus on for safety, I think it's safety performance, historical analysis of the safety performance crash history of a location of the past 5 years for all modes related to the infrastructure.
I don't believe part of our purview was to change the description.
Okay, fair enough.
It's all about how do we want to weigh, because every RPC is looking at the same criteria. Now we can, Adam's taking notes and he certainly will make note of that, you know, as related to infrastructure, and we can recommend that. But right now, our assignment is to look at these percentages. Andrew?
Could you go to the previous slide?
Yeah, I hope so. Let's see.
So of all the homework that Linda sent us for this meeting, this one slide had my attention the most. And I probably spent 20-25 minutes looking at it and trying to fathom how we got to this point. I just have no feel or background for how much work went into ranking this, because one of the things that struck me when I got to this was how low natural hazard resiliency is on this list. And I'm wondering if that is the result of decades of prior improvements. And so that most of the issues that had a high hazard risk and needed hazard mitigation have been mitigated over time, and that the projects that are in the plan have less of that. Is that how that works?
You know, so my recollection is that in it might have started in 2019 and ended in 2020, but the Transportation Planners Collaborative, which are the transportation planners through all the RPCs, meet with DOT, and one of their primary pieces of work back then was to review all these criteria, not the percentages, but the descriptions. And that's where they did all of this work. And I believe at that point, there wasn't much on natural hazard resiliency before that. And I think this came up through that process. All of these were changed. I mean, the equity issue wasn't as big prior to that effort either. We could go back and look at those, you know, well, actually, we can't go back and look at it because we weren't doing virtual meetings back then, right? So we're just lucky the last couple of years. One of the advantages of the pandemic is I can go back and look at our meetings in the last 2 years, but I think that happened prior to the pandemic. And so these descriptions, I think this is the second go around with these specific descriptions and elements. So I don't know if that helps answer that question where this came from, but how I think we rated these was back in 2020, everyone had the opportunity to rate, like, let's say there's what, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15 items. I think they rated them 1 through 15. And then what we did was Nate went back into his cubicle where the magic Excel spreadsheet is. And he took everybody's ranking, and then in the end, which is why you have it to 200s, you know, 2 decimal points here, is why you have these specific numbers. That everyone did that 1 through 15, what was the most important, what was the least, and he came back with this.
I seem to remember a subcommittee being formed and hours being spent
Yeah.
reviewing this process. I think Mike was on that committee, but I don't
Yeah, it started with the
I wasn't.
survey, then it did the subcommittee, then we spent most of a TAC meeting kind of maneuvering them a little bit. So it was a lot that went into getting them where they are now.
Yes.
I remember within the last year, 18 months, we had a spirited discussion about changing one of these weights. I don't know if it was Linda.
It was Linda, and we talked about the equity and environmental justice and accessibility item. And I believe that's why that's at 4.26%.
No, in the end, after 25 minutes, I just did not know how to address this, because then which one do you, if you increase one, you've got to decrease another one.
I don't know. I mean, it isn't that. I mean, do you?
Yeah, because they have to total 100.
Yeah, and it does. It just
So
did.
we-
It's 100%.
Is it? Okay, good. I was thought they, so, I mean, yeah, you would have to do that.
In that regard, then for safety, if the data for safety performance is either hard to get or unreliable, then maybe more weight is put towards the safety measure.
That was a thought I had too, Jonathan. I don't know if the home viewers heard that, but Jonathan thought maybe we take a little bit from safety performance and put it into safety measures. Anyone from the virtual audience like to chat or share their thoughts about this? And if you are talking, and you just remember, unmute yourself.
So Sylvia, this is Mark. I think that it is valid to look at the descriptions and the performance measures that build those descriptions. And I think you had mentioned somebody had mentioned the natural hazard resiliency. How do you measure that? How do you measure something's resiliency? I think that's why its score is slower than something like safety, which you actually can measure with crash data, or countermeasures, which there's a highway safety manual that has measurement tools for measuring a countermeasure. My gut says that things that have an actual number that they can tie a measurement to have a higher score, and things that are softer and subjective have a lower score.
Right. I remember there was a lot of discussion about the support, and that's why it was so low. Sort of that softer element.
So if I could, I think to like giving some insight, like over the years being here a long time and seeing some of the changes in those categories. I mean, economic development, and people at home can hear me, economic development was like at the lower scale many years ago, because traditionally it was always a road improvement, a safety measure. And then we get into like demographics a few years back about lower income groups and reaching certain, particularly inner city minority groups and others that needed to be ranked somehow. So when I look at this, like I saw economic development now it's up to, and I'm not saying I'm against it, but it's a 12%, and that was like the 4 many years ago. And you just start to see how some of these things are beginning to change. But I think following what Jonathan said, I think that safety one, I mean, that's the thing that you're visibly going to see. if an intersection is improved, that's what people see every day, and that's. I've been on a few of these rankings, and we always had that as number one, but I agree with Jonathan, maybe change the performance of the measures a little bit.
Would you think that maybe, well, the easiest thing I think would be is just to switch the two?
Well, it's
maybe.
already the highest safety
Oh, it is
measures.
the highest, right.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it's fine to leave. I was just, it was more of a question
No,
of
it's a
how.
good one.
Yeah, so now back to leaving it. You could always move the 0.44 over. The
Yeah,
the hundreds drive me crazy. I would like to just see solid numbers myself.
Can I ask, I see that one more question, on the support, was there, does anybody that was on the committee years ago, remember we hear stories that these applications would come in and they always did not have letters of support from town officials, or it wasn't on a master plan, and is that getting better, I guess? Is it improving by still be getting letters of support when these applications come in from town officials, or?
We typically see letters of support, I think.
Yeah, and one of the things there too is there's a required amount of support, whether it's fiscal or depending on the project.
Yeah.
So a lot of times you don't need a bunch of points here because it's going to be struck as ineligible. It's lacking, that documented inclusion in a plan, or a fiscal local match doesn't even make it to this point.
I mean, we have seen projects that they aren't in a master plan at all. It's just sort of popped up, look how things have popped up because of COVID and the whole pandemic. Who knew about all these demonstration projects that would happen, the widening of sidewalks and making outdoor cafes? I mean, that really changed after the pandemic started, and it has continued. So some things just do pop up and don't have that master plan support. So I think having that at the lower end is not a bad idea because of that.
Do you need a vote on this, or are we looking?
Well,
Or support or something?
let's see, let me just go through. So just to wrap up the presentation, DOT requires engineering review of all projects to be included in the 10-year plan for scoping and cost estimation purposes. We did release an RFQ for on-call engineering. We did get one back. It was with VHB, who we have currently right now an agreement with. Let's see. And we do have a subcommittee working to review the one proposal. Here's their 10-year plan schedule. So all your communities, all our 14 communities have received a lot of information now from us about the 10-year plan project process. Submissions are due by the end of July. There'll be the candidate projects will undergo review by our on-call engineering. And of course, we'll be looking at these criteria and scoring those. We will have to provide a short list of candidate projects by November 11th. DOT will review them from December to February. And then our final regional priorities are due the end of March in 2023. So questions, but I believe we do have an action item on that, and that is to provide MPO with guidance on this criteria list. So feel free.
I mean, based on past experience, that we traditionally, our group would always make a motion to support the rankings and then forward that as, so I don't mind making a motion to support the criteria current regional weightings as shown with the 2022 numbers. Essentially.
Is there a time constraint to do that? Because I think maybe going back to committee and just, having been a lot of discussion and information that should be considered.
The only concern I have is I think communities would like to know sooner than later what the criteria are. We do have the MPO meeting coming up, in a couple of weeks, but that would only give, like, if you all don't have a recommendation, and this would just be really a recommendation to the MPO. Then I imagine MPO will look at this and maybe make a determination. Or they may, like you, want to wait on it until the July meeting, which if that's the case, that's the case. That's up to you. Do we want to go around and see what everyone feels, or how would we like to do this? Kristen, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I don't think moving around 0.5% is gonna change the overall rankings, so I'm fine, I guess, supporting it as is. It's been vetted in the past.
I agree.
Same.
Mark?
So I'm going to go the other way and say, if we don't have to start actually scoring until August, why are we going to rush it now? The community, you can provide the communities that this is what previous years' weightings had been. They, as you said, the criteria and the sub descriptions of the criteria are universal. The communities will have that to judge, to provide their packages based on, and you can give them previous year's weightings and say that this year's weightings have not yet been determined.
True. That's another way to go. I know we have Tom Clow and Jillian. Would either of you like to weigh in?
Well, I think that the list with safety at the top and go down from there is very appropriate. And changes that may be a smidgen of a percentage one way or the other aren't as important as the listing in the order that they're listed here, with the safety, the significance of network mobility and so forth. I think that was well done, and we should stick with that. And I don't think changing the percentages a little bit here and there would do any difference. As far as the timeline, I think sooner the better.
Jillian?
I agree with Tom. I don't think that there's any need to continue this. It sounds like it's been well vetted.
Tim White, I know you have probably a good objective viewpoint here. Any thoughts?
Sylvia, I'm okay with the percentages the way they are.
Okay. All right, well, did we have a motion?
Well, I did to get a discussion. I made a motion just to get it out there. I don't know if it was second.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Against?
Hold on, let me stop sharing. So we have a get my cursor over here and stop sharing. All right, so we have a motion and a second, and the folks in the room have voted. Was there any nay in the room? No. So let's go, Mark, how do you vote?
I'm going to be a nay. There's no need to rush it.
Okay, Tom,
Yes.
Jillian,
Yes.
and Tim. I'm gonna think that was a thumbs up, Tim. You were muted.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we have one nay from Mark. Okay. So we go forward with MPO, we recommend these percentages.
What was the motion to?
Support.
To support,
the
yes, to
existing?
support what the committee put together. Yeah, and I appreciate Fred's comment too, but it was more just to support what they put together for that.
Okay. All right, we have a couple other items. We have MTA Transit to Trails. Is that Tammy? Or who is this?
That's me.
That's you. Hey. All right, let me
lights.
You all have been looking at my mug for a while, so let me move the, it's over to Mike. There we go.
So MTA partnered with the Nature Conservancy on a pilot program for this summer to connect transit with trails. The first two have happened. It's the first Saturday of every month. We're running it May right through September, and the venue changes each month. So you can check out different parts of the state. Hasn't gotten off to a smash start. One of the unforeseen challenges we ran into is the state has required us to get special event permits for each location. I mean, all we're doing is bringing the public via transit to the entrance to the state park. Not using any facilities there, we're not, using a venue or anything like that. They've had all kinds of permitting and reservations and fees. It's been a challenge. This is very different than like Hampton Beach. Our first trip for Hampton Beach starts Saturday. We'll go out for the Sandcastle Festival, and we've never had any problem with that. We go out, we drop right on Oceanside Boulevard, make a couple trips out in the morning, bring them back a couple times in the afternoon, and it's gone seamless. And we have hundreds of people each Saturday. We'll probably fill 5 buses this Saturday going out to the beach. We have had 11 passengers for the Trails program total in 2 Saturdays. So it's been a little disappointing.
bad.
The first one was really undercut. The state would not allow us to publish anything with the location until the Thursday before the trip. So we had 48 hours to get the word out to the public. So it took about 4.5 months to get the permitting and the insurance and all of the red tape cut to get through. And then the last one was a late swap. We ended up going to Bear Brook because Silver Lake is full of algae. So we had to swap locations after all of that. So we're hoping that, now it's done. Pawtuckaway will be the next one. That'll be in July. We've got, posters off. There's a lot on social media. We're hoping the next 3, we can really get the word out and get some more interest, but it has been a little bit underwhelming, candidly, thus far, but we'll see. 3 more to go.
Can people bring their bikes?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, good to know.
And it's the same as the Hampton Beach or Deerfield Fair. It's $5 for a round trip ticket. So
I welcome if you want to send us something, we can put it in our next media blast,
perfect. Okay,
so,
we'll do that.
all right.
Who made the objections, like, or stomped on the process?
Oh, it's the state parks. So
State parks. Is
yeah.
that part of the resource? Economic?
Natural resources and then Fox Forest is actually great. They're, I guess, a different division within the state. So the September one, awesome. Right? We tried to do that. We picked that venue because the whole idea was fall and foliage, and maybe it'd be nice to get out there. They are a significantly less visited location than the other 4 we have. So also trying to gin up some interest in a place that's not as well visited as some of the other state parks. We will see, but yeah, very, very different working with them. They have been great. And I think part of it might just be this, there's a different world right now with advanced reservations and state parks, some of the busy ones. You can't just show up like you used to on a Saturday with your family. You have to reserve it weeks in advance and capacity limits and all of that. So
Yeah.
they were very afraid. The first meeting, they were, well, what are you going to do if 10,000 people show up? I said, after I finish dancing, I'll figure out how to get them there. And we don't run like that. So
Yeah. Well, good luck.
Yeah.
I think, James, you had a quick something for under other business, right?
Yes, yeah, I know it's already 11 o'clock and people have other places to be, but I think this message is important. There is a open notice of funding opportunity for something called the Safe Streets for All from the federal government. The reason this is important is maybe not, while this particular notice of funding opportunity is interesting, and Sylvia's going to pull up some slides and we'll publish them just so that people have them as a reference. What's really important as a takeaway here is that 30% of all federal dollars for surface transportation are going to come through discretionary grants over the next 5 years. So we have to start thinking a little differently about how we're going to grow the pot of money for transportation. If we do the old route of we get our allocation for our region from New Hampshire DOT, that's a very modest increase. It's a good increase and it's great, but it's a modest increase relative to the pot of money available for doing projects. And so this project is an excellent example of something we can leverage to get more money into the region. There's a couple different ways this can happen. So I'll overview what you're seeing on the screen here. Safe Streets for All is available to MPOs, counties, towns, and transit agencies. Notably missing from this is state DOTs cannot apply for this money. It goes directly to local actors and local entities and regional coordinators of local entities. What's allowed? There's two parts to this grant opportunity, this particular one. And that's to either make a safety action plan or to implement one's safety action plan. So for our region, we do the safety action plan if we want to chase this money. But once that's in place, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the SEDS plan that was created for our region. Once it's in place and you've added a list of projects to it, those projects then have access to this money directly for the next round. So like the SEDS plan, you come up with your wish list of projects that you want to do to improve safety. And then in the next Safe Streets for All funding round, you take and pluck out a project and you can directly apply for it with that project, as long as the safety action plan is in place. The reason I'm bringing this up now and with some level of urgency is that the deadline is September 15th. And if this were to advance into an application, either by individual local communities or the MPO, us, the Planning Commission, or potentially collaboration of all the regional planning commissions in the state or all the MPOs in the state, it's going to take a little bit of head time to do that. So I'm bringing it up now. How much local match is needed? 20%, pretty typical, right? But what's interesting about this is that because this is would be a direct grant from a federal highway to or US DOT to an entity, whether it's a town or an MPO, in-kind contributions are allowed. So that means accounting for staff time, accounting for private gifts. If you have a large business in town that wants to do some safety improvements and they want to pitch in money, that all can count towards your local match. I won't go through all this just because I know we're limited on time, but you can go back and pull this up if you want to see the elements that are required for a safety action plan. So these 7 elements are all required. It's, commitments from local leaders, develop a plan, develop a team to create the plan, do the analysis, engage the public, consider equity and local public policy, create your list of projects, just like a SEDS plan, and then describe how you track progress. There are some really good examples of this. The one on the left is a template that Federal Highway provides on how to create a safety plan. It says for local rural road owners, but the structure of it is essentially the same, rural or not, doesn't matter. The one on the right is the state strategic highway safety plan. I believe the state is required to have this. And so that one is also a good example to see what a strategic plan looks like. It's really a vision and strategies, and that's kind of how it works. Here, I will not read through all this, but just a reminder that 30% of all funds coming for transportation now are coming directly through discretionary grants, and so SS4A, this is one of them. There's a dozen more of these coming. So, some of those might fit well with our needs and wants. And so we might want to start thinking strategically about how we structure our organization to be able to go and apply for these things on behalf of our communities or support our communities directly applying. This is something to take back to your team and consider internally. The reason SS4A is quite interesting to me is it actually is a pretty good substitute for TAC, which has been very competitive and highly popular. And so all kinds of projects that would fall under TAP that our towns apply for would also fall under SS4A for implementation of an action plan once that project's listed in an action plan. This is, I won't go through this with too much time, but this is kind of just a breakout. If you're interested in seeing this, this is kind of, this is guidance from Federal Highway on how to break out your local third-party in-kind donations. And so it just gives an example of, it's almost stupid how it's laid out, but it just gives an example of how you can take an account for your local in-kind donation. So for example, a entity comes up with $80,000 in local match, that would be the 20% match required for a $400,000 project. For something like an action plan, you probably don't need $400,000. You could probably do it with a half or a quarter of that, right? And then in future years, once that plan's in place, you'd be able to go for a much bigger amount. Much like TAP, you have to have a local match of some kind. Here, it can actually involve labor. What's nice about this is that we actually don't need any dollars to implement a project, as long as we can get enough staff time sort of committed to a project. And so the big ask here is there an interest in this by the local communities? Do the local communities want to commit either funds or staff time or a combination of both and participate in creating an action plan? And would you want to do that under the MPO application? I would caveat that with, it's unclear, but there is ongoing conversation between the MPOs about doing a coordinated multi-MPO application. But no, the progress on that is kind of in fits and starts. It may come and go without anything happening. I don't know where it stands. I don't know who's going to apply. I don't know who's interested in applying and what the local matches are available. And so I want to make sure the towns know about this, because you are an eligible entity. You can go and apply for this money directly if you want to.
Are there ceiling or floors to the project sizes?
In the millions is the ceiling. There's no established minimum.
Okay.
And then this is just a link to go find the full details of the action plan grant. So when we post this PDF on our webpage, you'll have access to these resources that I'm referencing. That's it.
Okay, thank you.
So what is your process, or like, what are you guys, because their webinar they had last week, they stressed that multiple applications from a similar area wouldn't be looked on highly. So what's like your approach to determine if you, like, how are you guys going to coordinate with towns to try and determine if it's something you should lead, or?
The advantage of an MPO applying is that the town's time would be counted as an in-kind contribution. If Manchester applies and they can't use their own time as a contribution because it doesn't allow the applicant to provide, it has to be third party. So you'd have to get together a group of business and community leaders and count their time as the volunteer time, if that makes any sense. So it always has to take a step down in who's volunteering to count as an in-kind contribution.
So if we did a regional one and we got several communities interested, could we use their staff time as in-kind match?
That's correct.
But we couldn't use our own staff time as in-kind match.
That's correct. And in the, I attended another webinar yesterday.
Yeah.
And they said their big thing was just don't apply twice. Don't apply as part of a region and for an individual project. So I
guess from Manchester, I would think that we don't have staff time because we're short on staff. So I would feel like it would be more of something that would be a consultant hired to do, and whether like the board will, we haven't talked to their mayor's office and know if it's something they would commit to funding in the future if we won, like if we tried, but I just know that as our community, we probably don't have a lot of staff time.
I would
given
be
our shortage of
surprised
staff.
if that's the same. There's so many communities that are short planning.
But the 20%
engineering.
match isn't terrible, so I'm sure other communities, if it was something that was joined, could come up with contributions toward the match.
Yeah.
if 10 communities came up with $5,000 each, you'd have a $200,000 safety action plan project. So it's not a super heavy lift.
Yeah, I would assume the more communities, the more expensive it's gonna get, right, though, to be able to identify projects successfully that you want to include. But yeah, I just don't know how we move forward to determine what the right.
Yeah, we're talking about that internally. I mean, this is also new and so quick, and the turnaround is so fast with that September deadline. So we're talking internally to see, do we talk to, because it's at the same time of the 10-year plan process. And so, it's all a bit much. So yeah, Mike.
Even if not for this, I think it may be a really worthwhile exercise to kind of work with the communities. There were going to be a bunch of these
Yeah.
that kind of come out in a row, and the timelines are going to be ridiculously tight. And then the award has lagged on everything. I mean, we're still waiting on areas of persistent poverty that was submitted and due last August and hasn't been
Yeah.
awarded. Region 1 has told us it's coming the end of June, but so much is coming at that application piece. Even if you don't make September, I think it's still worth having an idea, what are the projects we're looking for funding? And then as these things come out rapid fire over the next federal fiscal year,
I think
you're
you're
ready
right.
to kind of pounce.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
The pot of money is huge too. Like, even if we don't make it for this year, this is $1 billion per year fund. So they have $5 billion to hand out through SS4A, and $1 billion for the next one, and $1 billion for the next one. So this
Yeah, but you can't do an implementation grant unless you have your action plan in place. So it's like, why,
Right.
you don't want to delay doing an action plan. I don't know, or at least trying. is
Right.
kind of-
And our problem is that 20% match.
The size of the numbers tend to lend, I mean, in my mind anyway, if I'm a federal reviewer, I would rather you put in a regional project that has a much bigger price tag than have to send me, 8 or 10 of these little $20,000, $30,000. I have $1 billion I need to get out the door. I'm not looking for 5 figures.
We'd love to do that, but we'd have to coordinate that
Right.
match.
Yeah.
So this is our first sort of putting it on the table, see what interest might be out there, and probably we'll be touching base with your different departments. See if there's any interest, and we may try to come up with some sort of couple of different alternative scenarios that might be different approaches on this, and see if there's interest. So stay tuned.
And let us know if any communities are looking at transit implications of this, because that's one of the components. We've done a lot in Manchester, everything from sidewalk improvements to trash and recycling receptacles to lighting, because it's in the vicinity of bus stops. So that's a way to get some extra points.
Right.
MTA can be a co-applicant along with towns. One other thing to note on all this is I did reach out to New Hampshire DOT, and they were supportive of the idea of applying because strategically it can help them address projects that might otherwise end up or already be in the 10-year plan or on a list of projects that was applied for TAP or CMAQ. All those things could fall under something like SS4A.
Is this federal highway money?
It is.
So they're allowing transit.
Sorry, US DOT. It's directly under Secretary Pete Buttigieg's office. Sorry.
Okay, but it's still, I mean, it's different divisions of the DOT that are coordinating this. I'm just curious as to how much coordination is taking place in the discussion of this when the transit authority is required to have a safety plan through DOT money, and now they can be a co-applicant on another round of funding, which, I mean, is that really the best use of?
If Mike already has a Vision Zero or a strategic plan for reducing fatalities and injuries, he can demonstrate that to the federal government. He can go directly ahead to implementation. He can apply for an implementation grant this year.
Yeah, I'm not, for good reason though. We're locked out because you have to show that improvement, and our rates are 0. So yeah, can't go down from there. It's a good problem to have.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, James.
Yeah, sorry that took longer.
Oh, we have a hand up. Jillian.
James, can you send an informational email on that? I'd like to discuss it with other people here in town.
Yes, I will forward sort of the basic information along to Sylvia and Nate and ask that maybe one of them distribute to the TAC just to make sure that all the Ts are crossed and Is are dotted.
Yeah, we'll probably send that out early next week.
you.
All right, unless there's anything else, we're ready for you, Kristen.
All right, motion to adjourn.
All right, all in favor of adjourning? Hey, still thumbs up. Thank you. Thumbs up. Thanks for your time. Have a good rest of your month.